Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Doyle, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to what is the fifth and final episode in my South African wine series. And I am finishing off with the red signature variety of South Africa, Pinotage. So the crossing of Pinot Noir with Sanso, which happened back in 1925. Now, if you've ever heard that Pinotage tastes like banana skins and nail varnish remover, I can, with 100% conviction, tell you that is not the case today. Now, I am talking today to sales and marketing manager of Kanonkop, Deidre Taylor. I made sure to visit Kanonkop when I was in Stellenbosch because they are definitely considered one of the prestigious wineries of South Africa, and they were one of the pioneers of Pinotage. They played a significant role in establishing Pinotage as a flagship grape variety in South Africa. They've gained both national and international acclaim. You will learn all about this variety today, the full history and the story of this grape, and of course, why and how have Kanonkop helped put Pinotage on the map. So, enjoy this episode. I just want to start, before we get into the nitty-gritty of Pinotage and, of course, Kanonkop. What has been your journey into wine? Was it always going to be wine? Was that the destiny?
I suppose in hindsight it was the destiny, but definitely wasn't the plan. It definitely wasn't the plan.
Yeah,
and I think it's amazing how many people happen into wine by accident.
Yeah, me
too. I had every plan to. I was studying at university, and I studied industrial psychology with a plan to do HR.
Okay.
And I realized that in the middle of my second year, HR wasn't nearly as much fun as I thought it was, but I was far too lazy to restart a whole new degree. So I finished my degree, but I realized very soon that wasn't what I wanted to do. But the benefit was I grew up in Cape Town and moved to Stellenbosch to study. And Stellenbosch, obviously, wine capital for South Africa.
Oh, of course.
I got a very deep introduction to wine from a very young age. And I realized that actually, wow, this is pretty cool. I quite like this. So after finishing my studies, or during my final year, I started work at a winery in the cellar door. And I quite liked it. And, I've never left. And the funny thing, it's one of those things that if you start speaking to people in the wine industry, so many people have that kind of story. One of the owners of the winery, he studied law and then he always says he decided he was too honest to be a lawyer and came to work for the winery. And our winemaker wanted to study to be a doctor or a dentist or something, and he also happened to be here. But I have lots of these stories of friends in the industry that it's like the industry chooses you more than you choose it.
Do you know what it is? You get captured. It's something that once you start that journey, once you start asking a question of, I love this juice, and why does this one taste different to that? And why is this same wine better this vintage than that? Then that's it. You're done. You're done for. Yep. You've been sucked in. You've gone down the rabbit hole, and there's no going back, is there?
It's a very incestuous industry. It's large, but it's really small, and you start knowing a lot of people, and it's kind of hard to break free of it. There obviously is a huge amount of work, but a huge amount of enjoyment as well.
Exactly. We're lovingly chained, aren't we?
Yeah. I couldn't wake up in the morning passionate and excited to go sell toothpaste or toilet paper or canned beans or whatever. So yeah, very very happy with this accident.
Good choice. And so you said you started in the cellar door and never left. Is that actually at Kanonkop, or did you start somewhere else in Stellenbosch?
Funnily enough, I started about 4 kilometers, about 2 miles down the road, in a cellar door at a winery called Morgenhof. And then I went to work for Nearlist shortly after that.
Oh, fantastic! Yes,
great brand. And then I went to go and sell Pinotage for a winery in Wellington in South Africa called Dimmersfontein. And I started at Kanonkop from there 10 years ago. So September I'll be here for 10 years.
Gosh, you've been there for a while. So tell me, okay, why Kanonkop? Did it capture you, or you captured them?
I think in this instance, I knew I wanted to work for Kanonkop long before they knew they wanted me. I mean, it's just one of these absolute icon properties. I had known Johan and some other members of the team in some sort of, we were quite involved in sort of a regional project, which I did a lot of the admin and the arrangements with. Of this ward, of this appellation. So I got to know quite a lot of people from the various wineries down this road. And I always liked Kanonkop. I liked apart from the wines, which were incredible, I liked the way they did things. And I often said to my husband that if ever I had a chance, that's a winery I'd like to work for.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
And one day we were sitting at a friend of ours was having a birthday lunch in Somerset West, and we were sitting around the table, and somebody piped up and said, "Oh, did you see that Kanonkop's looking for a sales and marketing person?" My eyes went big, and I turned around to Rob and I said, "Wow, can you imagine that?" But at the time, I had just signed myself into a year contract with the previous winery, and it was a commitment that I couldn't break. It's not me, so I didn't apply because I thought, no way they're going to wait for me. And then about a month or 6 weeks later, I got a call from a recruitment agency asking me, have I seen the ad? And I said, yes, I had. They said, okay, well, you haven't applied, so you're obviously not interested. And I said, no, just hang on a moment. I'm very interested, but this is my situation. And they said, well, fine. If you're the right person, they'll wait for you.
Wow.
And they did. They waited for me for 6 months.
That's destiny. Isn't that incredible? And actually, I apologise. I'm calling this winery Kanonkop because I am a very classy Brit. So I should be saying Kanonkop.
Kanonkop, yes, but that's very Afrikaans. So Kanonkop is absolutely fine.
I know. Well, let's see what happens going forward. And do you know what? When I came to see you and got taken care of beautifully, I made one big mistake. I did not get the iconic photo with the famous cannon.
Oh, no.
I know.
So take one. You're sitting on the cannon in future.
Well, I didn't even get there. I just didn't even think about it. And I regret that massively. So could you tell everyone about the cannon, please?
So the name Kanonkop, it means Cannon Hill. And if you visited Cape Town and you go down to the city at noon each day, you'll hear the firing of the noon gun, which is a cannon on the top of Signal Hill, which was part of a whole series of signal cannons in the Western Cape. And back in the day, they would wait and see the Dutch trading ships approach Table Bay. And when the cannoneers saw that the ships approaching the harbour, they'd fire the cannon to let the farmers know that it was time to, pack their goods and head to the harbour for trade. And there was a whole series of these signal cannons all the way through the Boerland, which was really the food basket of the Western Cape in those years. And one of these signal cannons was here on this property. And that's how the property got its name. Yeah.
And that's why you're supposed to get a photo and sit on the cannon.
Exactly.
I was too busy just drinking the wines. How ridiculous of me. Anyway, so what do you think for somebody saying, okay, right, Kanonkop, why should I be drinking that? Why did you want to work for them so badly? What is so unique about this winery?
So I think, what I knew back then when I started here and what I know now about it, it's actually much better. When you look at something from the outside, you have a perspective, but it was a much smaller, much narrower one than I do from the inside. And sometimes you're mistaken. What you think you know, what you see from the outside, when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of things, you're disappointed or you feel that you made the wrong move. In this instance, it was completely the opposite. The little bit I had seen from the outside was nothing close to how amazing it would be once I was on the inside. So I think for me, some of the points about Kanonkop that make it special is, first of all, we have to speak about focus. So as a winery, we focus on two grape varieties. It's Pinotage and Cabernet Sauvignon. And all of our wines are based on those two wines, either as 100% single varietal wines or as blends. So there's a huge amount of focus. There's also a massive focus when it comes to quality. So Aubrey Beyers, our current winemaker, Aubrey and I we've had at length discussions, sometimes more in agreement and than other times. But he is absolutely ardently dedicated to quality. And if it means wines being released late, or, being bottled later than expected, or the volumes being smaller than needed, the choice of what goes into the bottle comes first. So we will always only bottle the absolute best quality wine, and there is no question around that. And I really appreciate it, because I know that I can stand behind any bottle with confidence, and it's very, very seldom that there's somebody, our biggest hurdle is getting somebody to try the wine. But once the wine's in the glass, your battle's won. I don't really need to say that much after that. So I really appreciate that. So focus and then quality. And I think, obviously, site plays a big role. So where we're located on the Simonsberg in Stellenbosch, really sort of the epicenter of quality wine production in South Africa, on the base of the Simonsberg mountain, quite low-lying, porous soils, lots of decomposed granite, various different aspects. We'll chat about it a little bit further just now with Pinotage, but we're on the south-southeast facing slope, which is the coolest site in South Africa, obviously, and which Pinotage enjoys. So there's various different, technical bits about what makes the wine special. But lastly, I think I would like to add that it's really the culture of the winery that I think it's most amazing. And the culture is defined by the team, of course, by the people here, but largely directed by the family who own the winery. And, we people often expect when they come here, or when they meet us, that it's going to be a very serious place. Although the wines are serious and the quality is serious, and we speak about longevity and excellence in the bottle, shoes are optional if you come and visit us. I have to remind Johan to wear shoes when he walks to the cellar door. You can bring your dogs to work, you can bring your kids to work. It really is a very casual sort of family environment. And people, they feel that. They feel that with the warmth and the sort of, there is an incredibly warm, happy space to be in. And people pick up on that very easily. So it's a combination of a very casual environment with extreme attention to detail and quality, if I had to sum it up.
Love. Yeah. And this is family owned and fourth generation, if I recall.
Yes. So the current owners are brothers Johan and Paul Krieger, and they inherited the property from their mother, who inherited it from her father, Paul Sauer. And the first owner of the complete farm was J.W. Sauer. So it's their great-grandfather who was the first owner of the property.
And then we talk about the family, but I also want to touch on the winemaker. Oh God, I bet you I'm going to pronounce this wrong. The winemaker Beyers Truter.
So no, Beyers is very, very, very accurately pronounced. So Kanonkop turns 50 this year. The wine brand is 50 this year. Our first vintages we bottled was in 1973. And since then we've had 3 winemakers. So the first one was Jan Boerland Coetzee, who's the current owner of Frissenhof. And Jan made and bottled our first wines. Beyers then joined us in 1980 as a really young winemaker. I believe it was his first job. And he's one of the most, he really is a lovely man. He's very, very warm, very humble, very engaging, very social. In Afrikaans you would say gezellig, really somebody people love to hang out with, and he loves to hang out with people. So,
a nice word.
Yeah, gezellig. It's like social, but with an exclamation mark on the other end. So he was with us for a very, very long time, and he made and bottled the first Kanonkop Sour. So he was here from 81, and he left us. 2002 was his last vintage. So he was here for a really good long session, good long stint. And now he owns a winery called Beyers Truter, which is just down the road from us.
Yeah.
And we actually Beyers Truter and Kanonkop are very close. And we're very involved together in the Pinotage Association. We host a lot of joint events together. We share a lot of importers in certain markets. The teams work really well together. So there's a lot of love and camaraderie between the two brands still today. And then Aubrey took over from Beyers. He joined as Beyers' assistant in 2002, and Beyers was very ill just before harvest of 2003. So Aubrey really had a baptism by fire and made this first vintage. And then when Beyers left, he took over as winemaker. So he's been with us now. This was his 21st harvest on Kanonkop. So we have a really long tenure with each of our winemakers.
Yeah. And the reason that I specifically mentioned Beyers was just because he has really, I think, brought the attention and the limelight to Pinotage. Would that be fair to say?
Very much so. So the first major awards that were won by a Pinotage wine was won under Beyers. We talk about, some people refer to him as the Prince of Pinotage. Some people refer to him as but that is how he is spoken about. And I think his dedication to the grape variety, was incredible. And because of him, a lot of the success of the current day success is due to his involvement. And if I also say to you, we've got a trophy in South Africa. It's called the General. It was a big deal back then, but it's called the General Smuts Trophy, and he was the first one to win that one with Pinotage. And then also there was the Diners Club Winemaker of the Year trophy that he won in 1987 with Kanonkop Pinotage, and then in 1991 he won the Robert Mondavi Trophy at the IWSC Awards. And I think what happened in those years, the wine industry was so much smaller than what it is today. The world of wine was so much smaller. The competition was so much less. So big awards like this, won by one producer, it really, even the number of awards that were around, the number of competitions were much less. So a winery winning so many consecutive awards with the same wine really put a lot of attention on the property, the winemaker, and the wine. So that really helped to launch Pinotage as a variety. And Beyers always made it differently. Kanonkop's quality on Pinotage has been incredible since the beginning. We didn't go through that, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, we didn't go through that sort of weird, funky, strange, poor quality period that Pinotage is a variety, on the lower end, where a lot of people experience the variety for the first time. That never happened here. Yes. So we were looked to as sort of the benchmark for the grape variety since the beginning.
Well, so can we talk about the full story of Pinotage for a second? So for everybody, could you just talk about its origin and how it was actually created, first of all, and then why it did have a bad reputation?
Yeah, so Pinotage was created by Professor Perrault. He was a professor at the University of Stellenbosch, and the cross-pollination was done in 1924 between Pinot Noir and Cinsault. And for some reason, we called Cinsault Hermitage. So that's how the grape variety got its name. Pinot from Pinot Noir and Tage from Hermitage. And the first experimental vines were planted at a place called Welgevallen, which is not far from us. It was an experimental farm, which belonged to the university, where they ran tests on soil and clones and rootstock and all the rest. Then those vines were transferred to Elsenburg in 1927, and Elsenburg is right across the road from us, so 500 meters as the crow flies. And the first experimental wine from Pinotage was made in Elsenburg in 1941. But Kanonkop then only planted Pinotage here in 1953. So it's a very, very young grape variety. It really hasn't been around all that long. If you think of 1941, the first wine made, we've only been making wine from that variety for 80 years. It really is a newbie, a new kid on the block. So initially, we had a lot to learn because we were trying to make Pinotage as we would have made Cab, would have made Shiraz back in those years. We didn't understand the grape variety. So I think a lot of the challenges had to do with cellar hygiene. It was rather, if I talk about the problems with Pinotage, it's got to do with winemaking rather than the variety itself.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe if I can explain, Pinotage as a grape variety has a naturally high pH, so it's very susceptible to bacterial spoilage. And you need to have really excellent cellar hygiene to prevent that. And also how you treat it. It ferments much quicker than Cabernet does. So all of that had to be taken into consideration. But we didn't know that. We had to work with it, play around with it, experiment, see how it performs, get to understand it. And I think largely where the difficulty came in is when South Africa, when the trade embargo was lifted, and South Africa was opened up to the international wine market, which was in 1991. There was a huge attention put on South Africa, and we were all very excited about entering this big world of wine. And we went out with, sort of the entry-level stuff, and that's what people, what supermarkets and the like bought. But in those years, our exposure to international wine quality, to international wines, to technology, to winemaking technique was very limited. You know, we were really quite insular for many years. So the quality that was coming out of South Africa in those years wasn't the greatest. And also we had the double challenge of not understanding this grape variety fully. But that all is, I mean, those are long gone, really long gone issues. To find, of course, you can still find poor quality Pinotage, just like you can find poor quality Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc. There are many poor quality wines made from all around the world, but it's not the grape variety. And there are a lot of really, really good Pinotages made today that I think have really, really ended that that feeling, or I don't know what to say, the stigma around the variety.
Well, it's because it's interesting because, of course, I remember when I went to study at the WSET school, they would talk about Pinotage being, if it smells like nail varnish remover or banana skins, that's a Pinotage, which is a horrible description and is going to always put people off drinking Pinotage, right?
Of course. And I mean, it's also factually not true. I have been through the WSET school too, and thankfully a lot of chapters have been rewritten on South African syllabus. Do you still find those characters on certain Pinotages?
Not at all. And it's interesting you say that, because I don't know if it was a year ago or so, it was definitely during lockdown. I was lucky enough to Wines of South Africa. We're doing very big Pinotage tastings, virtual tastings, and I got a whole load, 6 bottles in a row. And I sat and drunk them and analysed them. And they were all fantastic. And of course, all wineries that are top of their game. But my conclusion, and I remember writing this in an Instagram post, my conclusion was always there was juicy, intense, concentrated fruit, a mix of always black and red fruit. It wasn't kind of one or the other, you know, very often like red plums and black raspberries. And then there was always a smoky element. So it might be a sweet cigar, it could be tobacco, it could be incense sticks, but something a bit smoky. And it would always finish with something spicy as well. Medium body typically, and then this velvety kind of silky tannins and a typically high acidity or medium plus. And that was my is now my specific tasting note, or if I was to describe Pinotage. So I don't know, I mean, what do you think of that, from you probably drinking more Pinotage than me?
I think that's very correct. I was going to say that I do find a combination of red and black fruit, but it tends to lean more to the red fruit profile, but less so than if you were considering, you know, Sangiovese, Pinot Noir, Gamay. It's not in that profile. It is darker than that. It also is slightly richer. It's got a very intense sort of glycerol effect, which is it gives a slight sweetness, even though it's not sugar sweetness. It has a slight sweetness in its use.
Sweet and sour.
It's like a sweet and sour. Yeah, exactly.
I always get sweet and sour with Pinotage.
And then that slight smokiness. It could be. It's more like a cigar smoke rather than is the cigar itself. And it's not the type of smokiness you would find on sort of gunflint or anything like that. But it's a combination of that, like a cherry cigar, the smoke of that with a bit of spice or incense. So it has a very interesting finish. And I think Pinotage, because of those type of characteristics and its sort of slight sweet palate profile, lends itself to being very food friendly and very pairable. And some of the dishes we like to pair it with is, obviously South Africa, we have a lot of game. So we have springbok and kudu, ostrich, anything like that works really well with Pinotage. Also wild boar, or if I could say, you know, game birds, or even duck. Works very, very well. And then the other spectrum, it also handles seafood. If you think of sea tuna, salmon, we often serve it with sushi. It works well with that too, because it doesn't have an intense tannin structure. The tannins are
velvety,
exactly. It's not like cab that's going to doesn't fight in your palate with those with those foods. And then also we often refer to it as sort of Asian style dishes, but that's very broad. And if you can think of like a beef soy stir fry, with a bit of umami kind of character. That works really well with Pinotage as well. And as soon as you put sort of soy, I've done an amazing dinner in Tokyo once. We had beef done with smoked soy and wasabi. It was incredible. It just makes that fruit profile really just leap out of the glass of the Pinotage.
But it's interesting you say that, because again, when I said to you, I always get this sweet and sour note, very often in my tasting notes for Pinotage, something like soy sauce might come up, something like 5 spice might come up, something like balsamic vinegar might come up. These kind of flavors and aromas very often are in my tasting notes for Pinotage. So I love the fact that you're saying that those kind of foods are perfect pairings. And Rick, you're forgetting the most obvious one, but I felt like you obviously decided not to say it. Braai, good old barbecue.
Well, in my defense, any of those meats or fish we would cook on the braai.
It goes without saying, right?
Yeah.
Dear me.
And then also just to mention, if you think of Pinotage in its status within South Africa, or its position with the South African wine industry, there's only just over 6,500 hectares of Pinotage planted. So it's only just over 7% of our total hectares under vine. It isn't a huge portion of what we do as a country. And sometimes people think South Africa is all about Pinotage. And of course, we champion our grape variety, but it's not a significant quantity of what we do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, or it's a significant quantity of what Kanonkop does, but not every winery.
Well, if anybody is in doubt, they should come to you because the focus is there, so they know they're going to get good quality.
Exactly.
Can I ask you though, with the fact that you've got some of the oldest Pinotage vines in the ground, are they 70 years old, your Pinotage?
Yes, so we have 5 or 6 different blocks of Pinotage on the property. Yeah. The main ones are planted together, and they were planted around 45 years ago. And that we use for our estate Pinotage, and those are all southeast facing slights. Then we have a separate block of Pinotage, which is planted in it's quite low lying, but north facing aspect. And that block is the oldest that we have planted. It was planted in 1953, so 70 years old. Yes. And we make a single vineyard wine from that block, which is known as the Kanonkop Black Label Pinotage.
And I was tasting the 2020 out there when I was in South Africa, and you make about 6,000 bottles, right? 6,000, yeah.
6,000 bottles. It's the most expensive Pinotage around. It's the highest rated Pinotage around, but it's special and it's unique, not because we do anything different. In fact, we treat those grapes very similar, or completely the same actually, in the cellar as we do our grapes that come in for the estate Pinotage. It's really just showing the site, and you can taste the difference in the berries. I wouldn't have believed it if somebody told me that, but I've experienced it myself when, my office is overlooking the receiving area. So I walk past tractors and tractors full of grapes every day during harvest, and you taste this and you taste that. And the one day this tractor arrived, and I tasted the grape, and I was like, wow, what is this? And they said to me, oh no, that's the Black Label block. And I was blown away at how different it was in the actual berry. So the only other thing that's different is we use Burgundian oak, 2 coopers. The main one is a Burgundy cooper called Tremaux. So we use their barrels for the Black Label, and it gets 18 months, 100% new oak. So it has a bigger new oak component than what our estate Pinotage would have. But other than that, the wines are made the same. It's an expression of the variety, the site, when it was planted and so forth.
But I just remember the purity of fruit. There was just this. The fruit was really shining. It was so clean, so concentrated. It was beautiful. And a bottle like that, how long is it going to age? Or just any premium Pinotage?
Well,
what do you think?
For the Black Label, we don't actually know the answer, because the first vintage we produced was 2006. And last year we hosted a masterclass on the Black Label. The first time we ever showed all the vintages for all the way from 2006. So we opened everything together, and what I can tell you is 2006 is still too young. So it's definitely longer than that. But for our estate Pinotage, I like the wines at around 10 to 15 years from vintage.
Yeah.
That for me is a sweet spot where you get complete integration, softening of tannins, integration of acidity, but still a good fruit profile in combination with a really nice sort of tertiary savory notes. If you like your wines older, you might want to wait 20 years, or if you like drinking young wines, then Pinotage is suitable, 2 or 3 years from vintage, where you have a bright fruit expression. But I like the 10 to 15 year. That for me is the complete marriage of everything, where you get the best of both worlds.
And do you find from tasting some much older vintages, does Pinotage just become much more savoury?
It does. So we were fortunate. So with our 50 years, Aubrey and I have been hunting for older vintages, and we don't have much from the 70s. In fact, we have next to nothing. But we were fortunate to get back a few bottles of 73 and 74. And 74 was Pinotage. So we opened a couple of those under ideal conditions with Amarim, our cork supplier, who could then recork it for us under argon. And we were able to taste them. And they're showing so well. They do become very savory, but savory in a similar way to what Burgundy becomes savory. So you still have a slightly, if I say cranberry, or there's a bit of a sweet red fruit profile to it as well. It doesn't lose that completely. It doesn't become dried out and savory. It still keeps a bit of a sweet fruit savoriness, if I can explain it like that. It's really delicious. It's such a treat to try. I mean, the first time I had ever tasted those wines, and I was quite blown away. We were such a small industry back then. We didn't have the cash flow to have to save a bottle. We needed to sell everything we could to stay alive.
Well, thankfully, you've managed to get your hands on them.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about the fact that you're still a very young industry, and especially with Pinotage. Are people still experimenting with where to plant and to see how that affects the Pinotage? Or is there a bit of a consensus now of there is a really good place, a specific soil, something that's perfect for Pinotage? Is there an ideal growing condition?
I think if you first come to the question about consensus, I'm not sure that there's consensus in any wine industry, especially when you're working with creatives, right? So winemakers are like chefs. They like to create and experiment, and you find out something new every year. What I can say is that Pinotage is planted quite widely through Stellenbosch. It's planted in Wellington. It's planted in the Swartland, and some really old vineyards of Pinotage in the Swartland. And it's planted in sort of the Heermelanade. Pinotage likes a certain amount of warmth. It does. It doesn't like very cool conditions. In fact, it was the idea around its creation was because Pinot Noir didn't do that well, or didn't survive in very warm conditions, and Professor Perrault really loved Pinot Noir. So he did this crossing to create a grape variety that could survive in the warm South African climate. But Pinotage remains an early ripening grape variety. It's early mid-season budding and early ripening. So it's the first of the reds that would come in on our property. So it can't handle too much sunshine. It can suffer from sunburn. And its skins aren't as thick as Cabernet Sauvignon. So I think a moderately warm climate probably would be the best answer. Parts of the Swartland, and in dryland, bush vine, it can give really good concentration. And those guys out there, they've got beautiful old blocks of Pinotage as well that they're making wines from. And there are more and more wines coming out of there from Pinotage. But historically, those Pinotages were used by the cooperatives to make, red blends and dry reds. So but I think also if I can comment on the cooler spectrum, wines like Southern Rite, for example, which is owned by Hamilton Russell, they have a much cooler site for their Pinotage, and it's beautiful and bright. So it can handle a fair amount of diversity. I don't think there is a single answer, but it's got a lot to do with how you farm it.
And then, again, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Are people starting to focus on Pinotage clones? Is that a thing yet?
I don't think so, but I'm not in the viticultural game. We have only 4, I think, registered clones of Pinotage in South Africa.
Yeah, it's not a lot yet.
It's not a lot. There's one is an SF with the SFW clone, a Stellenbosch Farmers Winery clone, which is clone 48, which is what we have planted here on Kanonkop, largely. There is a 49, which I think is referred to as the Slaley clone, and there's also one with clone 50, but clone 50 or PI 50, that doesn't seem to be in production anymore. Apparently they had a lot of virus issues, and they were struggling to get clean plant material to be able to propagate that. What they have done is they've taken vines from Kanonkop and they've propagated Kanonkop material. So that's become known as, that's the clone 6. So there are producers that have now planted the Kanonkop Pinotage. Yeah.
Yay! Okay.
Yeah, so
look at you. You will go down in history regardless.
Yeah.
With your own clone.
We'll have our own clone. So, but we'll see. We'll see the development, and obviously on each property, on each site over the years, vineyards evolve. And clonal, so a lot of muscle selection is also amazing to keep consistency on properties, because you don't really know what you have and how those plants have changed from when you planted them 40 or 50 years ago.
Precisely. Okay, but I think that's still really, really interesting that there are specific fine clones, and I love that there's a Kanonkop clone.
Yes.
So I think this brings us to the tasting portion of the podcast. I'm thirsty. So in my glass, so that people don't realise it is just 100% red, I have one of your rosés. So this is the Cadet Rosé 2022. Beautiful colour, onion skin, pale, light. No one's going to be offended. It's the colour that people like to see. So how are you producing this? Is this just light press? Or is it direct press?
I mean, it comes into the cellar. It'll spend anything between half an hour and an hour on the skins, and then we make it as you would a white wine. So it's really, really little skin contact. Pinotage, you can get quite a lot of colour out the skins, so anything longer than that, you're going to end up with something medium pink, which is not what we want. And we also specify on the label that it's dry, because South Africa makes a lot of sweet. We make a lot of sweet rosé in South Africa. And we also a market that we drink a lot of sweet rosé in South Africa. So we're careful that we don't disappoint somebody who buys it hoping it to be sweet, and also that we don't people don't steer clear of it because they think it might be. So it's properly stipulated on the label that it's dry. It's made 100% from Pinotage, and this is from grapes that we bring in. So it's 2 particular vineyards that we farm for rosé. One which is in Stellenbosch, and one which is just outside of the appellation, just 20 k's down the road from us. And that's why this one is wine of origin coastal.
Well, interesting. This reminds me, I was eating a rhubarb crumble yesterday. There's this real, again, maybe it's that sweet and sour note sort of thing, but there's this rhubarb well, not the crumble part, rhubarb note on the nose, and then an absolute intense amount of like strawberries and cream.
I get a lot of strawberries and cream. There's a lot of sort of cherry and candy floss. If you think of that really, if you go to the farm fair kind of candy floss. And we also have a bit of that orange melon, that sweet melon. And in South Africa, we call Simonsberg. There's a bit of that character as well. But it has a beautiful creamy texture to it.
Totally. It is dry. It's really crisp. It's really refreshing. But my gosh, the prettiness of and the sweetness, as you're saying, like there's even like maybe a floral, like some rose petals in there, but like the candy floss note, I'm totally getting there. And beautiful. And I think a big old bowl. Tell me.
I think the most important thing to note here is that sweetness that you're associating, it's fruit sweetness. It's the brain's association with the flavor profile. Yes. This wine is bone dry. It's 2.5 grams of sugar per liter, but it has that beautiful expression. And I think that's why it works so well with seafood. And if you think of serving this with, salmon roses or something along those lines, you get that the saltiness from the fish and the soy and the spices and the wasabi. It just makes that fruit, that sort of floral note, to really just leap out the glass.
That is delicious. That is also quite different from everyone else's rosés. I feel that's really quite unique. It's medium bodied as well. So to be so refreshing, but it's not light. No. It's, it has weightiness to it. Yummy. That's fun. That's fruity, but actually really interesting. I'm passionate about this.
Brilliant. Remember when we created this rosé, 2010 was our first vintage. it needed to fit into a red wine drinker's profile. Everything else we did was red. We couldn't have just very light, fresh, zesty poolside wine. Our customer base was going to think, what's that? So it fits in very, very nicely in its family of red wine brothers.
I love this, everybody. This, and what I love even more, and everyone's going to really enjoy this is £11.95 in the UK from Frontier Fine Wines. So literally under £12. When people want a dry rosé and they go to Provence, as they typically do, to get anything of actually this kind of quality, you're going to need to start paying at least 20, if not £25. Probably for the creaminess and the weightiness of this rosé, you'd need to go £25. This is not like a Provence rosé, everyone. This is actually far more fruitier. This is fruitier, but it's dry, it's crisp, it's refreshing, and it's complex. I love that. I'm so happy about this because I haven't tried this before.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm a Kanonkop rosé virgin, not anymore.
And a convert at the same time.
I absolutely, and I'm going back. Right, okay, so in the same range, you've got the Cadet Pinotage 2020 in front of me. So this is a red wine now. We're back to the red wine scene. Can you tell me just a little bit about this one?
So Cadet as a range started in 1985. We made it started as anything not good enough to be part of our top tier of wines, Pinotage, Cat and Bull Sour. All those barrels that were, that we declassified as such, we would then blend together and we made a wine called Cadet Dry Red. And it was always a Pinotage-based blend, and people bought it enthusiastically and realized it didn't take them long to figure out it was a really affordable wine from a very top winery, and it grew in demand. But with Cadet, being a blend, we had received a number of requests from various markets because of our speciality on Pinotage that they wanted to have a Pinotage, a classic well-made wine made from Pinotage at a more affordable price point, because they were saying, to get people to experiment with the grape variety on our estate level at £40 a bottle or whatever. It was tough. So that's how Cadet Pinotage really started. And Cadet Pinotage is made from grapes that we bring in from about 4 or 5 growers in Stellenbosch. We don't own the land, but we farm it with the owners. And it arrives, it's all hand harvested. It goes through an optical sorter, and then it's fermented in open concrete tanks in the cellar for about 3 days. It finishes alcoholic fermentation in stainless steel and then goes to barrel for 12 months, second, third, and fourth fill. But the idea with the wine is to really once again express to showcase the fruit expression of Pinotage. You can keep this wine 2020. You can drink now, or if you happen to forget a case or 10 in your cellar for 5 or 7 years, you won't be disappointed. The wine ages very well. But the idea is that we wanted a more medium-bodied, more fruit-forward expression, less oak, and ready to drink younger.
But what I find really interesting about this is it's actually still quite savoury and complex. You get the sweet and sour note. I'm really getting that now. Like this kind of real sour plums, real intensity of fruit with some lovely strawberries. Again, I know you always say you get more of the red fruits. It's funny. I always go towards the more... I don't know, more that plumminess always seems to come through, but it's kind of sour. But then what's nice about this, there's this earthiness, like a bit of kind of sometimes like this wet soil or this potted soil. It's a note that I often get in Rioja with Tempranillo. That's kind of coming through, but it really is. It's fruity, it's approachable, absolutely, of course, medium bodied, but there's that nice kind of little tickle of tannins, but they're really, really soft, very, very, very fine grained tannins. And maybe even like that smoky coffee note, I think, on the finish.
Yeah, more
lovely
like
balance.
sort of coffee grinds rather than fresh coffee. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, totally. And maybe that's the point of the tannins. It's almost like got that kind of, the ground coffee edge in terms of how it gives texture on the tongue. That's so lovely. And less than £15, everybody. £14.80. So all of these wines are on Frontier Fine Wine. So it's brilliant. You can get all of them all in one hit. Nice and simple. But yeah, less than £15. And I think it packs a punch for the different complexity of fruit, for the concentration, and the length, because again, I can still taste it. 30 seconds later, still grapefruits. And that's the point. There's always a richness of fruit with these great Pinotages, I find. I'm a massive fan of Pinotage. Everybody buy Pinotage. It's enough. No more nail varnish remover. There's not a hint of that in here. Okay. And now then, let's compare this to the estate Pinotage, which also happens to be 2020, which is interesting because, of course, it's had the same amount of time in terms of aging and maturation. So how would you go about producing the estate Pinotage?
So the estate Pinotage is produced from the vineyards on our property. We have about 50 hectares of Pinotage planted. All of it is planted as bush vines. And as I said, they're around 45 years old. Our bush vines, in terms of yield, we get about between 5.5 and 6 tons per hectare, which is very, very low yielding. But the focus is on, once again, on healthy, small berries. You know, we're looking for almost an ideal or a perfect ratio between juice to skins. We don't want the berries to be big because then you're going to get wines that are insipid or lacking in character. So when we harvest those grapes, so it comes into our cellar at about 24 degrees Belling. It goes through an optical sorter and then also made in those open concrete fermenters for about 3 days. And we do hand punch downs or pigeage every 2 hours on a 24-hour basis. So 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It really is hard work. But the result of it is that you get a wine with a beautiful color and very beautiful, stable color, stable tannins. You know, obviously the amount of oxygen integration helps with tannin softening and helps with color stability. And it results in a wine that has incredible longevity. So if you pick up, we hosted 2 masterclasses a week and a bit ago in London and in France, and we showed Pinotage back to the mid 1980s. And the color of that 89, for example, was still quite red. Very little browning, very little oxidation showing there. And that's because of the winemaking method. It'll then go through mallow in barrel, and it spends a further 16 months in 80% new oak before being bottled. And Pinotage is the only one of our wines that we fine and filter before bottling.
Do you know, I adore this. For me, this is everything that I expect Pinotage to be. You're going to be so happy. Guess what? Mm-hmm. I get loads of red fruits. Mm-hmm. Loads.
But everything is a step up. If the concentration is more, the complexity is more, the color is more. It's on a different level. Yes. As delicious as the Cadet Pinotage is, which it is, yes. This is really a step up in quality.
When I go back to the Cadet, that's when you realise as well it's a bit more savoury. But actually, because this is richer and more concentrated, you've got loads of juicy ripe fruits. There's a lovely perfume. So mixing in with like these cranberry and red currant notes is like a little bit of soy, as I was kind of mentioning, and then lavender, ironically, which is because it has this very pretty lift for me. It's very kind of almost explosive fruits on the palate. And there's this like lovely sweet leather note going on as well. It has these lovely chalky tannins. So again, they're just, you want to lick your mouth, put your tongue around your gums because they're so ripe and they're so yummy and beautiful high acidity. It's bright. It's, welcoming, it's giving. It's such a gorgeous, perfect example of Pinotage for me. It really is, hands down. It's gorgeous. And for everybody, it's £31.50. So it isn't necessarily a wine that you're going to crack open every single week, but it's definitely not something that's going to be half as expensive as I think other known premium wines of the world. I think this is phenomenal value for the amount of fruit and the amount of quality you get. I'm big fan, seriously. I hope people can understand how much I like your wines. Oh, dearie me. But yeah, I mean, I really think you guys know what you're doing. You have the history. And I love the fact that you have the different price points. So for whatever anybody wants to spend, they can find something. And of course, as we said, we have the black label. I'm not sure the price of the black label, but it's considerably more. So that's the special anniversary wine for everybody.
So the black label is available in the UK in small quantities, and it trades around somewhere between 150 and 160 pounds.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's definitely a wine that you should save up for, because if you want to try something with purity of fruit, yeah, you're definitely going to get it. Deidre, thank you so much for just taking us through the journey of Pinotage. My question as well, when I left your winery, I was handed, which I thought was brilliant, I was handed a little sheet of all the wineries outside South Africa making Pinotage. And there's wineries in California, Canada, New Zealand, USA, even Israel. There's one winery in Brazil. It's a decent amount of people playing around with Pinotage, which is exciting. So my question to you, have you tasted any of the Pinotage outside of South Africa?
I have tasted the one from Israel, and I had one made in the States. It's very, very different. It's very different to what we have. And they've been such small plantings. It really is. We say the grape variety is planted there. It's usually planted by an individual producer or maybe 2 or 3 producers. There's no, you're not going to go into an area and find hectares and hectares of Pinotage anywhere else. But it is interesting. I had a chat to a winemaker not that long ago from California who was experimenting with the grape variety. So it has been, it's niche. It will always remain niche. But it's done. It's gone a little further than our borders, and it's always interesting to try. We had a Ukrainian producer come up to us at ProVine with their Pinotage, so it's always interesting to try. Yeah, it's amazing, and guys are willing to experiment with it.
Love it. Anyway, everybody, if you haven't understood by the comments that Deidre and I have said, Pinotage is where it's at. Get rid of any negative emotions or misconceptions. Go and taste some wines, and you're definitely going to be safe with Kanonkop. Conclusion, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think I would encourage people to give it a try, whether they would like to try Pinotage as a red wine or try it first as a rosé. I think the rosé gives a good indication of the grape, the flavor profile of the grape variety, because obviously there's no oak involvement there. But it's something to be enjoyed, and a very, very food-friendly wine that's very versatile and works with a whole host of dishes. So thank you so much for putting a bit of focus on Pinotage and spreading the good news. And we hope to see more converts when we travel around the world next.
Come on, everyone. We are now Pinotage lovers. Deirdre, thank you so much. I'll see you, hopefully, at the winery where I can have my photo on the Canon.
On the Canon. It's a date.
Cheers. See you soon. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye. So, I hope after these 5 episodes you're in love with South African wines. This really was the most favourite holiday I have ever been on. The closeness of all the vineyards. In fact, I never even made it to Constancia. This is recognised as one of the oldest wine producing regions of South Africa and is literally situated in the southern part of Cape Town. So close, I took it for granted that I would have time to visit. This is the region famous for Vin de Constance, the sweet wine, so perhaps I will find another reason to do an episode on this at another point. But for now, if you are looking for one of the most beautiful places to see, where nature will take your breath away, where you can have affordable luxury and you can mix the sea with hikes, with spa, wine, food, safari, and a city break, all of this in one, South Africa is a must for your next holiday. So now to finish off with a wine quote, which I can't find who to attribute it to, but it seems the perfect quote to sum up these episodes, especially if you can't literally get on a plane right now. And it is: wine is a passport to the vineyard, an invitation to connect with nature's canvas. So that is it for today. Next week, I am going to finish off with my final deep dive episodes on sparkling wine for WSET diploma students, or those of you just wanting to really get into the details. please do go and leave me 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts if you are enjoying these episodes, or if you are listening on Spotify, please give it a rating, share this episode with your wine-loving friends, and like the podcast on whatever app you are listening to. Now, don't forget, to travel is to live. Your passport is screaming to be stamped. I shall leave you to start planning your South African travels. You can contact me if you have any questions and want advice on Janina at eatsleepwinerepeat.co.uk, or on Instagram, the handle is at eatsleep_winerepeat. And until next week, my friends, cheers to you.